Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Dynasty Season, Dynasty Football Podcast from Hart Sports Talk. I'm Patrick Hart. Today, we're going to give you a little bit of a rundown of what our normal league is like. We play PPR Superflex with 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, a flex spot, super flex spot, 1 quarterback. But instead of using a team defense, we play with IDP players, and we use 2 linebackers, 2 DBs, 2 defensive linemen, and 2 defensive flex spots. So we've got a total of 9 offensive starters, 8 defensive starters. And let me tell you, IDP is the way to go. So we'll give you a little bit of a rundown. We'll give you kind of how we score it, some basic ways to get into IDP, and why you should. But otherwise, let's get into it. All right, so we're talking about IDP. How does IDP make fantasy more fun? How does it make it more exciting and more competitive? Well, it's simple. Instead of playing a defense and special teams, that is gonna, you're just kind of throwing somebody out there unless you have one of the top few. You're just throwing somebody out there who may have a good matchup. Instead, you get to look at trends from teams, who's running the ball at a high rate, whose linebackers are coming down into the box, who's got an extra safety down in the box. You're looking at those DBs, your safeties, your corners if they're getting interceptions, if they're tipping passes. The lockdown coverage doesn't really help you much in IDP fantasy, but you've still got good players all over the field that we're missing opportunities of getting to use in fantasy football because they're defensive players. So I joined a orphan dynasty league about 3 seasons ago now, and it was an IDP league. And I went out looking for one because that's what I wanted to do. And that league is 8 offensive starters, 8 defensive starters, and 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, tight end, super flex, 2 linebackers, 2 DBs, 2 defensive linemen, and 2 IDP flex players. Now, a lot of times those IDP flex players are going to be your linebackers. Your linebackers are your big IDP point getters. If you are unfamiliar, you're looking for tackles where you may be looking for catches, targets, volume, opportunities when it comes to offensive players. You're looking for the same thing with defensive players. And that opportunity, those receptions, that PPR value that you're looking for in receivers, you're getting in linebackers with their tackles and DBs with their run support coming down into the box, their over-the-top play with interceptions. Now, there's some standard IDP scoring out there, and a lot of it is great. It's great for an introduction into IDP to get you hooked. And then what you got to do is you have to figure out how it balances out in your league. In our league, we have gone through and we've kind of tweaked the defensive scoring here and there. Our league, I got the inspiration from that Dynasty league that I took over, the orphan team. I got the idea from that to get all my friends together from my yearly leagues and start our own Dynasty league with individual defensive players. So we made a couple small tweaks. We added a 3rd wide receiver slot. I think it's a great thing in Dynasty. I think 3 wide receivers should be standard in the future. But every league is different. What you enjoy, do it. Nobody's telling you you're wrong. The biggest thing that I enjoy with IDP, though, is when you first fell in love with fantasy football, or you found fantasy football as a way to grow your knowledge of football, your knowledge of different teams, to find players you liked instead of rooting for just your team, to find athletes and personalities that are out there that you can follow no matter what team they're on and enjoy football because you're rooting for a player, you're enjoying the game, you have investment. You can do the same thing with defensive players, and defensive players and IDP fantasy has improved my knowledge and understanding of the defense in NFL systems and how linebackers are used in pass coverage and blitzing the quarterback and whose responsibility is what. And it has elevated my knowledge of football to a point that I understood it at a base level before. But when you start researching, well, what linebacker am I going to play? You start looking into blitz tendencies. You start looking into what kind of defensive scheme they run. You start looking at what their responsibility is. Are they going to spy the quarterback and plug up interior holes on running plays? Are they going to, be covering a lot in the flats on tight ends, man-to-man coverage? What is their responsibility? Those are things that you have to figure out when you're going to look at a player. It's just like when you look at a wide receiver and you say, well, is he going to be relegated to just the slot short yardage targets, or is he going to get outside work? Elijah Moore last year, was he going to get stuck in the slot, or was he going to get outside work? We have a lot of the same questions when it comes to rookies on defense. And a lot of it has to do with, when are they going to get reps? When are they going to pick up the defense? A lot of times when you look at those key positions, especially linebacker, you want those guys to be 3-down players. You don't want the guy who gets subbed out in nickel, especially with the way offenses are running 3-4 wide and throwing the ball so much now. If you are that linebacker that gets a third of the snaps as the rest because you get rotated out in sub packages, well, you're not going to be valuable in IDP fantasy even if you're a great NFL player. And that's just the reality of it. You look at great corners, some of them aren't IDP relevant because they don't get targeted. And IDP defensive players get their points primarily off of tackles. Turnovers are big plays. Your defensive line is kind of similar to the tight end position on an offense. They're very dependent on getting sacks. And if you can sack the quarterback, you're going to have a good week as a defensive lineman. Now, just like tight ends scoring touchdowns. If you don't get it, there's a few very good ones. TJ Watt, he's the best. If you have TJ Watt, you can put him out there every week. If you don't, and there's a few of those guys that fit into that defensive line mold that you can start every week. But a lot of times you're looking at who they're going against. You're looking at the matchup. Who's got a weak offensive line? Is Joe Burrow giving up 9 sacks in a game? Do I want to start the defensive line against him? Yeah, I do. Those are the things you got to look at, just like you look at, well, how strong is the secondary that this wide receiver is going against? They have one shutdown corner. Maybe this number 2 wide receiver is going to have a good day. Those are the same things that you look at on defense, but it adds such a level of investment to your team. And it really, takes that fantasy knowledge that you can understand NFL football, and it makes you understand the other side of the ball as well as just the offense. And it helps you with offense as well, because the more you know about how defenses run, you can look at what an offense does and what a wide receiver does and be able to make more of an educated kind of rating or ranking or where you want to put these guys in your dynasty list, because of you understand maybe, oh, well, they had a really, really bad game, but this is why. This is what the defense did. Devontae Adams, getting double and triple covered. If he has a bad game in that and you just look at the numbers and you're thinking, oh, well, he had a bad game, something must have gone wrong. Well, yeah, the defense schemed him out of the game. Now, it's Devontae Adams, so that's not always going to happen, but he's an example of what defenses do to try and stop the number 1 target in an offense. Offenses do the same thing for players like the Bosa brothers, TJ Watt, JJ Watt, Micah Parsons. These guys are electric pass rushers, and they get to the quarterback, and offenses have to prepare for that. Like, if you don't think the Bengals, when they went into the Super Bowl, were preparing for Aaron Donald, of course they were. Look at the first half of that game. Look how fast Joe Burrow was getting the ball out of hand. It was the game plan to avoid taking those hits. Now, it didn't work out in the second half. Got pummeled. But how do you stop Aaron Donald for 4 full quarters? You don't. So IDP adds a level to fantasy football that I think is the next step for those diehards. It's not for everybody. If you're a casual fan who, you like your team and, you play fantasy to hang out with your friends and have fun, you're probably not going to pay enough attention or know enough about defensive players to really enjoy IDP. Now, if it's something you've never done and you're interested in trying it, I would recommend doing like an IDP best ball league or an IDP only league with some of those people that you play with year to year, just to try it out. See who likes it, who doesn't, see if it's something that people are interested in. You can do it with 10 people, 8 people, however many people you want to try it out with. You can inflate those rosters a little bit, get a few extra starting spots if you have less people. But what I like is 2 DBs, 2 linebackers, 2 defensive linemen, 2 defensive flex. It gives you a pretty standard defensive setup. And the biggest thing to avoid if you want to try IDP fantasy football, don't add just 2 IDP flex spots or something like that. At that point, there's so many defensive players who are going to get 100 plus tackles that if you're only adding 2 spots, at that point, everybody's just getting bonus points added to their score every week, that it really isn't going to make a difference. You're not going to have to make those tough starting decisions. Whereas if you were starting 8 players and 2 per position, you really have to balance your bench with your offensive players. We have 20-man benches in our league, so 17 starting positions, 20-man bench, 5 IR, 5 taxi. So we have a couple of quirky rules where you can, promote somebody from the taxi for 1 week or 2 weeks. But having to manage your bench with defensive depth versus your offensive depth and what you prioritize and where you're strongest and where you have 3 extra defensive linemen stashed, just hoping one gets a great situation in the offseason, or you hope for those second-year breakouts, or you hope for like Harold Landry this year in free agency. I have him in 2 leagues. He's defensive line eligible, even though he's really more of an outside linebacker who rushes the passer pretty often. Those 3-4 linebackers that play on the outside, a lot of them are D-line eligible if their primary job is rushing the passer. So that's something that's nice on Sleeper, which is the only platform I use is Sleeper. If you get into some of those players, like Harold Landry's very valuable. I got him for pennies trading away Zach Cunningham for like draft pick fodder a couple years ago. And now he's a top 10 defensive lineman every year. The last 2 seasons, he's been lights out. And so now he's going into free agency. Defensive free agency is crazy. You thought it was hard to track all the opportunities and what quarterbacks were going where, which running backs are out of a job, who's going to get replaced in the draft. Try doing it with defense. It adds such another level to fantasy football that I think it is, if you are a diehard, you love fantasy football, you love playing Dynasty, it's the way to go. So we're going to have one IDP show every week. It's going to be kind of a overall show. It's going to cover linebackers, defensive linemen, your matchups during the season. We're going to talk about rookies going into the rookie draft. We're going to have a tier list up on Patreon. I already have the running backs up on Patreon. I have half of the wide receivers done so far. Still watching some film. It's actually what we're going to be knocking out the rest of this week is wide receivers. Then we're going to take a look at some tight ends, and we're going to do less scouting on quarterbacks because it's a situation. The situation probably matters more than what I'm going to see on film. And there are NFL scouts and people who recognize player talent who get paid way more than I do, who get it wrong all the time. So I am not going to go out and scout quarterbacks real hard. I'm going to wait and I'm going to judge the situation. But when it comes to running backs, and we look at some of those guys, Elijah Mitchell, right? He was a lot of people had him up there in their running back rankings, and he didn't go until late in the draft. But he got a job. And Trey Sermon, who we all thought, me included, I drafted him at the end of the first round in our rookie draft last year. And it was just so disappointing to see him get on Kyle Shanahan's bad side and not exist in an offense, and then to bring in Elijah Mitchell, who looked like he was their guy and looked good, So it's very easy to get rookie picks wrong. It's very easy for the hit rate is so small on rookie picks. Always remember that when you're looking at trading veterans. So we'll give a IDP show once a week. Starting next week, I'm going to hopefully be done with my offensive scouting, and we're going to do a week on running back profiles as we go into combine season. So combine's coming up beginning of March, and after that we have the beginning of the tampering period. So free agents are going to start flying around. Coming tomorrow, I think, is day one that teams can start franchise tagging their players. So we're on the lookout for, Bates in Cincinnati, the safety. We're looking out for, Adams in Green Bay. We're keeping an eye on some of those big names that could have a lot of impact. If Devontae Adams gets franchise tagged up in Green Bay, I think they're going to do, if they're going to franchise tag Devontae, I think Aaron Rodgers is playing in Green Bay. I don't think they go through all that and keep him up there if Aaron Rodgers is going to be out of the building. Now, hey, Aaron Rodgers said he was going to let us know by franchise tag decisions. So we should know soon. Hopefully tomorrow. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Pat McAfee show's coming back from a little week break after that Super Bowl. So maybe we'll get an Aaron Rodgers on Aaron Rodgers Tuesday to let us know where he's going next year or what he's doing. He's asking for a trade, if he's staying in Green Bay. The reports right now are that Green Bay is willing to go all in to get Aaron one more year and see what they can do. So if they can get some weapons, like last year when they went out to try and get weapons to help Aaron, it was Randall Cobb. Let's draft a wide receiver. Wouldn't that be incredible? But hopefully that comes soon. After this, we're going to go into, after the running backs, we'll go into wide receivers and tight ends. Leave the quarterbacks out of it. But we'll probably do 3 episodes on each. Maybe 2 while we're in prospect season as we're waiting for free agency to start. Maybe a Monday, Wednesday on the position groups, and then a IDP show, and we'll pick a position group each week and kind of go with it for the IDP show. Right now we're going to do Monday, Wednesday. It's going to be all Dynasty season stuff for offense. Friday will be the Dynasty season IDP show. If you've got questions, you can send them over on Twitter or comment on the YouTube video. This podcast is going to be available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and Anchor. Anywhere else, we will be probably soon, but not yet. We just set up Apple Podcast. Apple may take a couple days for it to pop up there. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on Spotify, that should be there soon. If you can go ahead and leave us a review, a like, that would be very appreciated. As we just start putting out some of this content, we got to get into that algorithm and start letting people discover our podcast and see if they like our work. We'll probably get Austin on here in the future. Hopefully we can get some weekly matchups going on so I can kind of run down some of these matchups during the season with whoever I'm going against, so we can compare our lineup side by side and go over some of those IDP start sit decisions and see who's really the IDP kings. So I'll give you a hint right now. The number 1 linebacker in Dynasty IDP, it's Micah Parsons. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching the Dynasty Season podcast. This is kind of our intro. Just wanted to give you a rundown of kind of what we do. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on the scoring on our first IDP show. on Friday. But coming this week, probably going to chill a little bit and finish up my scouting and kind of look at some of the free agent opportunities that are available coming into the tampering period. And we'll have a list coming out of the top teams based on position of the opportunity for free agents and draft picks. That'll come out probably the first week of March, right before the combine. So as we get into it, keep you updated. Check out the Patreon for all my updated rankings. We'll tweet some of them out on the Heart Sports Talk Twitter. That'll be linked in the description of the video. If you have questions, you can shoot them there on Twitter as well. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Peace.